New this morning from the G7 summit, President Trump says China has called twice and wants to make a deal on trade. This after the trade war escalated on Friday as retaliatory tariffs were threatened by both countries, and President Trump ordered U.S. companies to find a different way to do business, to get out of China. That is based on the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Here to clear it up, let's bring in our guy, Byron Henry. He joins us from time to time here on AFN when we have legal questions. He is an expert on federal law. Byron, thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Matt.
So the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, President Trump claims he has the absolute right to order U.S. companies out of China under that law. Your thoughts on this and what the law actually says?
Well, that's a little bit of a stretch. He doesn't actually have the authority to order companies out of China. I think his tweet was hereby ordering companies to prepare. Basically, he was giving them a warning. He can make it basically impossible for them to do business with China or to make money in China, so that they would have to either shut down or move out of China, which is the equivalent of basically forcing them out of China. So he does have the authority to declare a national emergency with respect to a risk or a security threat, which includes economic security, by the way. It doesn't have to be a physical national security threat such as terrorism. And he can basically tax, tariff, or block exchanges or financial transactions with offending countries such as China. He can do it to entities, he can do it to individuals, and he can do it to governments. The law that we're discussing, the Emergency Economic Powers Act, was actually a reduction of presidential power that existed at the time, passed and signed into law by Jimmy Carter. So this is actually a congressional oversight where he has to consult with Congress, report to Congress, and Congress actually has the ability yearly to end a declared national emergency by the president. But he does have the authority to declare the national emergency. He must do so. It sounds like basically it needs to be done in writing. Once he does that, he has a vast array of authority that he basically said he would invoke against Mexico, if you remember, by closing the border and issuing other sanctions. He invoked this act, and it looks like he does have the authority to basically make it impossible for American companies to either trade with or manufacture goods or make money dealing or trading with China. So in essence, he can force companies to either shut down or get out of China economically.
Has this act been used economically as an economic threat? I know it's been used in the past, obviously, for national emergencies, but is this the first time it's been used for an economic emergency?
Well, it looks like it'd be the first time basically on the list with respect to the Iran hostage situation and other security threats, such as after 9/11, which were physical threats, and then they used economic weapons to deal with threats. But I think it'd be the first time it'd basically be a wholly economic trade war as the basis for invoking the act. But now the act specifically says that it's a national security threat, a foreign policy threat, or an economic threat to the economy of the United States. So the act's own terms allow economic reasons to invoke the act. But I think this would be the first time it would be purely economic that would be used to invoke the act.
I'm curious, and I know we can pontificate, and Byron's an attorney guy, so he sticks to what the law says here. But you mentioned that Congress can end an emergency with a joint resolution. What would that even look like? A trade deal? I mean, I don't even know what that would even look like.
Well, the act specifies a concurrent resolution, which, unlike a joint resolution, doesn't have to be signed by the president. So a concurrent resolution would simply be a majority of both houses of Congress voting that there's no longer an emergency. In other words, basically revoking. That's never been tested in court, but right now the text of the act would allow Congress to say, thank you for reporting to us every 6 months like you're supposed to. Thank you for consulting with us, but we don't believe that this is an emergency necessary to invoke this act. It didn't rise to the level. So you're supposed to have some sort of check and balance here, give the president enough rope to or enough leash to deal with things that come up quickly, that can't go through Congress, that can't have an act of Congress to deal with, give him enough authority, but also enough check on that power so that if he uses it unwisely or imprudently, they could say, no, that wasn't the kind of emergency we meant when we passed this law and gave you this power, therefore you don't need this anymore. So that could cause, obviously, internal issues at home, but it's a once-a-year thing, so it's not like they'd be having concurrent resolutions every month to striking down emergencies, but it is supposed to be some sort of check on the president's authority to unilaterally basically have this kind of power.
Does Huawei tie into this in any way? Huawei's been declared a threat to national security. We know they're entangled in the trade war that's going on right now. What's to say Huawei couldn't fall under this act?
It would. In fact, President Trump has invoked both digital or electronic espionage and the Huawei issue of the spying as two issues with China that he brings up often, and those are two issues he could use also to invoke. That it's not just an economic threat, but it's also a foreign policy, maybe national security, even through spying and other issues through espionage. So, in fact, President Trump has a lot of bases to deal with China. In fact, we've talked many times about dealing with other countries such as North Korea, and when Republicans or conservatives want to use force on people, they say you shouldn't use force or pressure with force, you should use economic and diplomatic reasons. Of course, when President Trump resorts to economic or diplomatic reasons, they fault him for that too, even if he uses a law that was passed by a Democratic Congress and signed into law by a Democratic president. So he's using basically the tools that Democrats gave the president. It's almost as if he was threatening some sort of physical response. Of course, he'd be criticized for that too. So let's be thankful that he's dealing with this on an economic, diplomatic front, using powers that Congress gave him and not doing something that could literally cause a constitutional crisis.
Sure, yeah. Byron, we appreciate your time as always, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you for weighing in.
My pleasure.